Hello, hello. Thank you everyone for being here today. We are so grateful to get to speak with Mariah Norris, the author of Hands Like Secrets. Oh no, the blur. Um, and well, first and foremost, I'll do a better photo of the book later, but first and foremost, hats off to you. I think it's very difficult to write kind of a forbidden romance in a fantasy genre that can sometimes feel oversaturated, but you made it stand out in such a unique way. And I think I was completely rooting for Saeli the entire time. And you made such likable characters and you created a story that started from such a despairing scene and just kind of threw us into this world. And it never stopped. And just hats off to you because it was such a great and fun book to get lost in and escape into.
Well, thank you. It was, uh, it was a very long process to write, but it was fun to write, and it's been through many iterations.
I'm glad that you said the word process because process is by far my favorite thing to talk about. I've got loads of questions about it. But the first question that I wanted to ask was about the decision to put it in first person present tense, which is something that I've fallen in love with recently because I write in present tense all the time, but I only tried first person present tense recently. I think for Saeli's head, given that her mind and the way that she's thinking through things is such an important central part of the book. Like, were you always going to write it in first person present, or was that something that you discovered or developed?
Actually, no, the first person present tense happened in one of the much later drafts. Finding the right point of view for this book was so hard because I think I started in third and then I went to first and then I went back to third and then because it's a fine line between you have to be in the character's head enough to where their decisions kind of make sense. And when I was in third person, it was so obvious that Rafel was manipulating her all the time. It's like, but if you're in her head, you kind of don't see that as much because it's all from her point of view. And the present tense came because it needed to feel like this was unfolding as she was experiencing it. So
That's a really good point. I didn't even really consider is the fact that how we would have viewed it if it was from an outsider looking in, being like, "Oh yeah, you're being manipulated by this guy." But like you said,
By the way, spoilers.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't watch the interview if you haven't read the book. That's on you. But yeah, because frankly, reading it in the lens that you wrote it in, I was totally like, oh yeah, he's a good guy, this and that. Like I'm all for it, Team Raphael. Like I'm here for it.
I got that impression as well when I was reading through it. I thought, because I wanted to talk to you about like tropes and stuff, because obviously the enemies to lovers kind of thing is really overdone, but this felt super fresh. And I think the reason for that was that I totally bought into the idea that Raphael was like falling for her and charming her and stuff like that. And it felt so, because you saw it from her perspective, it all made perfect sense. But then uh, I don't think that the twist and the manipulation and stuff would have worked as well if it was from the outside. I think you really had to be with Saeli in her head going through it. And God, I was really rooting for it to go to go in that direction because the romance came off like I really loved the tension that was built up between them. Like I think I wrote down at one point in my notes, I was like, and in some levels, this is like a kind of fantasy, adventure, magic school, that kind of thing. But on the other hand, it also felt like a typical teenager who wants to run away in nighttime to go and meet this man that she's got a thing for, and maybe people disapprove of it, So it was very much like, oh yeah, it's just like an innocent kind of. She's quite young and stuff. Nope, it was. She was much a victim the whole time, I guess. But was that so? The decision to put it in first person, I totally get. Was the present tense also part of that?
yeah, excuse me. Yeah, it was I didn't want it to seem like that she was remembering this after the fact. I wanted it to seem like this was happening as it was happening. And
Yeah,
when you haven't written present tense ever before that, it's very difficult to keep in present tense because most books are in past tense, and so that's kind of what's in your head. That's what you read all the time, and so it feels weird to write says instead of said.
yeah. I've written in present tense for most of my writing career, and the reason for it I think is very similar, and it's that I don't want this being a retelling after the fact, like it's already happened. Otherwise, you get a sense that, well, whoever's narrating this is probably going to be okay because they're telling me the story after the fact. Whereas I really like the tension of not really knowing what's going to happen next, to the extent, especially in first person, that the characters don't know what's going to happen next. So their decisions are rooted in the present as much as the reader's rooted in the present.
Yep. Yep.
And I think you added like there's a couple little things here and there that really add to that. Like I'm just looking back at the map that you have at the very beginning, and you have a little note on there like points deducted for a T stain on it and this and that. And I think it's all these little things that kind of not just set the scene, but remind you like this is active, this is what's going on at the present kind of thing. And I think it's a nice touch.
The map pays off in book two, by the way.
Is that on the cover of book two? Is that Saeli, by the way?
Yes.
Nice. Yeah. When I saw the art, when I went onto your Amazon page to download Hands Like Secrets, I saw the second one. And when I was reading Hands Like Secrets, I thought, hold it, right. So that's Rafel on the cover of the first one. Is that Saeli on the second one? But obviously, I've not read book two yet. It's on the list. But so speaking of process, I know we were talking about, you'd said there were a lot of drafts, like later drafts, you completely changed the perspective and everything. There's so many questions I want to ask about the road to making it, but take us through kind of like the process of how Hands Like Secrets came together in the first place.
It started off as a weird dream I had where I was in this house
Nice.
and there were all these people around me, but they were not like my people. I was there as kind of a double agent or a spy or something like that. And there were people outside that were looking for us but for some reason I didn't want to go to them. I wanted to stay with this group. That was kind of the gist of the dream. And so that's kind of how the dynamics ended up. And then, oh goodness, I wrote pretty much the notes all the way through the end of the series and wrote the first book, and it was way too long. And at one point, it was going to be a trilogy, and then I had to make it 5. And funny enough, my husband still thought it was a trilogy when I was talking about it. He's like, wait a minute, when did it become 5 books? I'm like, I don't know, a while ago. Whoops. And so I ended up splitting the first book in half. And so Hands Like Secrets is up to the kind of what was the halfway point, and then Secrets Like Glass was the rest of it. And I had to expand Secrets Like Glass to fill out the word count because I had like 30,000 words. I'm like, that's not long enough. So, and that process was interesting. There's a lot of extra stuff that I ended up adding kind of like to the world building, to the lore. And so now I have to take that into my notes for the later books, which is part of the reason it's been taking a while, because it's like I know where I'm going, but there's a lot of extra stuff now that I have to kind of account for in the lore. So
Do you find when you're writing, if inspiration comes from dreams, it sounds like you can kind of be a spur of the moment thing. Do you have like a notepad on you that you furiously write things down when they come to mind? Or is this you run to the computer or you just remember everything whenever it hits?
it's a combination of I will write things down on my phone if I wake up and have an idea. And I have a file on my computer that's just all weird little bits of dreams that I remember. But when I'm actually writing a story, my most important process is making a playlist for it. And I will just, when I start out, I will just start dumping songs on that's like, this fits the vibe, this fits the vibe. And then I will listen to that playlist while I'm doing dishes or whatever. And, I'll get scene ideas in my head. It's like, oh, that would make a cool scene. How do I fit that in? So sometimes the story will get tailored to the music a little bit.
Is there any sleep token on the playlist for this?
Can't remember if I've added any sleep token because I've been working on this story for so long that the playlist is
Yeah.
kind of is what it is, but I don't know.
I'm curious what kind of music you listen to for the playlist because I do the same thing where, and it's funny you said dishes. if I'm doing the dishes or I'm hoovering or doing the washing or something like the laundry, I'll put on I have playlists for each of my songs or each of my books or my series, and I'll just put the playlist on and just see what my head comes up with based on whatever I've been reading or watching lately. And film soundtracks tend to do it for me, and like a lot of weird ambient, like dark ambient stuff and that. So, like, what kind of stuff would you put on the playlist?
I listen to a lot of symphonic metal, so
Yeah,
they're very heavily metal influenced. I'm looking up the playlist because let's see.
nice.
It seems to be a pretty common theme that I didn't realize because I know for myself that I can't read or write or work when music's playing, or like it has to be a very specific type of like those long form lo-fi like 10-hour videos on YouTube or whatnot. So, but it
Oh
has been
yeah, like
interesting to see a lot of authors have playlists that they play when they write. I think it's really cool.
Yeah. So on this one, I've got like Camelot, Within Temptation, Birthday Massacre, Delane, Nightwish, some other.
Nightwish. I know Nightwish.
Yes, Nightwish is my favorite band. This
I grew up.
new.
Yeah,
This is a new obsession.
nice. I know a lot of my friends who grew up listening to metal and stuff with me got really into Sleep Token in the last couple of years. I've not listened to them yet,
You
but
should.
I know they've got a whole thing going on, right? Like a whole narrative thing going on.
Yeah.
That's a cool crossover. I'll get into. I might wait until their big project is done, and then I'll give it a listen and see what it's like. But speaking of crossovers between types of art, so I love talking process with authors. I also love talking process with like visual artists. I know a lot of artists and stuff know the similarities between writing a book and like putting a print together or like a painting or something. And I know that you are also an artist, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually did the covers of both of my books.
That's what I was going to ask. Did you do the covers for them? They're really good covers.
Thank
Well
you.
done. I know a lot of people who've done their own covers, but they're not great artists, and you can tell. But no, I love the covers for both, especially if it's portraits of characters, because I know that's exactly how the author sees them. Then,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
so what I wanted is like, do you find any similarities between how you put a picture or a painting or something together and how you put a book together?
It goes through a lot of iterations.
Yeah, early draft into late draft. Yeah,
The Hands Like Secret covers, I think I went through 3 or 4 drafts and like partial sort of like, and then you get to a point where you're like, yeah, this isn't quite what I want. So yeah, he was like draft number 4.
What were the early drafts also like a portrait of Raphael, or did that come later?
They
Or was
were,
that
yeah.
always?
I was always going to do Rafel in some capacity, but it was like it had to get the face right, had to get the like that part right. And
I think it's also nice because it's I don't want to say uncommon, but there's a degree of discrepancy between covers and what people want to put on them. And it's quite nice to see an actual protagonist on the cover because then it's much easier to visualize going forward. Like I knew what Raph looked like, I knew what was going on. And when they talked about the long hair and this and that, I could very much see it throughout the story.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah, it was cool.
I had drawn him over the years, but I kind of realized when I was doing this cover, it's like, all right, I need to like nail down what he looks like.
Do you do like character sheets?
Um, I will do that when I'm drafting. I'll have a sheet that has like kind of physical characteristics and mannerisms and stuff that I can call back on. But I don't do like, what is their occupation and what are their parents' names? And I don't usually go that far unless I have to.
I guess it's more stuff that will be important in the story, stuff that you're going to need to draw on.
Yeah.
I do that with Dungeons and Dragons character sheets where I'll just like write down details and stuff and like more specifically like what they can do. Like I guess in Hands Like Secrets it would be like what moves they know and what kind of weaves and everything they can do, wards and everything. Which brings me to the magic system, which was one of my favorite things about the book, and I had loads of favorite things about it. But the magic system was incredible from the very first chapter. It's what really drew me in, that and the strong voice of Saeli. But the magic system seems like a lot of work went into it, especially, and I'd love to know how you come up with the names for everything. Because the names for the different moves, I think I wrote down the first one that caught me was Hands Like Clouds. Firstly, because it sounds a bit like the title, and that gave me a bit of a clue of what might be coming. But also because it just sounds like something straight out of like a wushu movie or something, you know. Like, so tell me a little bit about the magic
So
system.
the naming of the moves is actually me stealing shamelessly from both Tai Chi and from the Wheel of Time.
Oh, nice, yeah. I think I
Yeah,
picked up some of the Tai Chi stuff.
yeah, hands
Like I
like
do.
clouds or something like that is an actual Tai Chi move. Me and my husband
Nice.
did Tai Chi for a couple of years, and all of the moves having it like strumming the lute and the just names like that. I'm like, oh, I gotta use that.
I think what Blue Fly on the Wall and stuff like that. There was loads of them that I just noted down because I went, that's really cool. I want to know how she came up with this. Tai Chi makes sense, I guess, with the whole energy movement kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
And also,
sorry.
Because there was the
go
level
on, you go.
system as well.
So say that again.
Sorry, I said there was also like the level system. It was a very intricate kind of process with it, just understanding the niche at which it was because certain people could do certain levels. You had to train to go up in that. So it was if I saw it like the belt system to an extent.
Yeah, it was a little bit, the tier system was kind of a new addition to it because I figured they would have, like, they would classify the moves in terms of difficulty, and that would just be a thing they knew. I never did as much with that as I meant to, but it might come back in later books.
Yeah, it's good to have there to draw on later.
Mhm.
And I saw a lot of so I'm a big fan of yoga. I've done Tai Chi before, not very often, but I meditate. I like reading about the esoteric and stuff, like chakras and Kundalini and everything. And I saw a lot of that through the book. So I'm very interested to know how much of that was research and how much of that was stuff that you already knew. You know, we're talking like chi and sattva, and I know they talk about things like root and stuff like that as one of the patterns. And I went like, that's a chakra and stuff like. Did you have to look up a lot of that stuff or read about it, or did you?
The chakras I was already pretty much familiar with because I've been in kind of the new age witchy scene for a long time.
Yeah.
But like the sattva and rashas, those were basically Indian words that I stole. That I went and looked online and just I found ones that kind of fit the vibe and sounded interesting and altered them a little bit.
I'm in the book that I'm writing just now. There's a character who casts using mudras, like hand signs and stuff.
Hmm.
And the entire reason for that is because someone who does yoga was talking to me about them, like a picture or something, and they went, "Yeah, I'm doing this one or whatever because it means this." And I went, "That's really cool. I'm going to put that in a book."
Yep.
But I guess it's more about where you take it than where you get it from.
Mm-hmm. And
That's it.
you have to kind of tweak it to fit the world that you're building. And
But it is
Yeah,
still from someone who isn't an author, it is still very cool from my perspective to see where the inspiration comes from or how just like an everyday conversation can then become an integral part of a story.
mhm.
so I wanted to ask as well about how much of the inspiration stuff or how much of your background relates to, like, are you a fan of anime, manga, any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah. I mean,
So
the magic system is a combination of, Wheel of Time channeling and Avatar: The Last Airbender.
I
yes,
knew
so I
it.
didn't want to. I got the sense that you probably get that all the time. But when I started reading it, I sent it to Ryan and I said, "This is like Avatar, but like really cool." And
Yeah.
like, cool. And I love Avatar dearly. But this book is so I've read a lot of books that have a kind of heavy anime-ish influence to them, and sometimes it comes off like super cringy, like not really very self-aware. But this is the only time that I've ever seen someone do that, oh, I'm only using 10% of my power just now, like that kind of thing. It's the only time I've ever seen that done, and it's worked. I think it's quite near the start as well when Rafel's fighting is it the high priestess or something? And he's like, "Yep, I'm not even trying right now." And I wrote that down because I thought it deserved to be brought to attention.
But
Yeah.
it did very much fit within his character as you got to know him more and more as well. So yeah, he's cocky, but like he can back it up. So
Yeah, he's one of those people that he knows very well how good he is, but he's still human. He can and he's smart. So
well, that's one
Yeah.
of the questions I wanted to ask because as the story went on, it felt like it got much more existential in terms of Rafel. And I won't lie. I obviously we were talking earlier about perspectives, and from her perspective, you're gonna see one light, but if you look back, I'm pretty much I agree with what he's saying come the end there. I hear you there. He very much has a sympathetic ear in my eye. So I'm kind of curious what brought about that shift. Was he always kind of that, I don't want to say troubled or like philosophical or whatnot, but was he always kind of thinking in that light in your eyes?
I don't know if either of you have ever read any of the Dragonlance books.
I'm familiar with Dragonlance.
Do you remember Raistlin?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Raphael was based pretty heavily on Raistlin, especially at first. He kind of,
See, now that I know that, that makes so much sense. Yeah, no, I'm a big D&D nerd, Ed Greenwood and everything, and I'm a big fan. I like the Dragonlance. I read them when I was quite young, but I remember wrestling.
yeah. So he
I'm
was
pretty
always
sure.
going to be this character that like you never really know what he's doing. He keeps things very close to the chest, but you like he's always has a point, like so, and he always has this drive. And so you're kind of pulled into his whatever he's doing.
Yeah, he's
And
got a kind of gravity to him. I guess he's the one moving things around in the setting a lot of the time, making things happen and stuff,
yeah.
even
Yeah.
if it's not initially.
Well, and that was the thing was like he's very much portrayed as this rogue, this sole individual that everyone's terrified of. But then when Saeli goes back to the compound with them, he's very much a leader within. He's not a lone worker or this or he's not a lone soldier or this or that. He's working within a community. Obviously he's on top of the hierarchy there, but he isn't alone. And I think what's the word I'm trying to say here? Is it very much opened up kind of his leadership style and a lot that we knew about him as well. It expanded our horizons of Raf.
Yeah, a lot of the story is Saeli goes into the story having a lot of preconceived notions, and then the story just systematically breaks all of them so that she's left like, I don't know anything, do I?
As a
Which is
character, as logically minded as Celia is, some of my favourite chapters or scenes were where it's just her and either her friends or her mentors or even Rafel talking about why she might be wrong and why she believes the things that she believes. I guess because in her own head, I feel like she's like honest with herself to a fault, which is one of her strongest characteristics. Which obviously we've not talked about it yet, and I'm looking at the clock because I really wanted to dive into this. But Saley's autistic, and it's in a world. I think it says it in the chat, like in the synopsis.
there's it on the blurb.
In a world have a word for people like her, and I'm fascinated about what went into writing Saeli, especially with the first person present tense, where we're in her head the whole time.
Um, a lot of it was I wanted her to be autistic, but I didn't want that to be like the only thing that she was, or I didn't want that to be the point. I just wanted to have it's like this is this type of character and this is the situation that she's in, so here we go. And so,
Yeah,
and I figured that in this fantasy world, they might not have a word for people that are like her. And how does someone who lives in that world navigate?
yeah. It's it was especially interesting, like the situations that she'd get herself into because she wasn't sure how to handle it or because she took things differently to how they were meant. I think like the one that kept coming up was that everyone thinks that because she survived meeting Rafael, that she must have slept with him or must have been taken advantage of by him or something. And she's like, no, like that, but she doesn't know how to explain to people that didn't happen. And all like the little social situations that she gets herself into, like awkward situations all the time. But I thought it made her very endearing. because I also don't know much about the world of the characters. So it was a really great perspective to come at it from.
Yeah, and some of it was just kind of little bits of situations that I've been in where I feel like I didn't react properly and
Uh,
what happened from that. And
I think there's also the element, I forget her roommate's name, that's on me. But her
yeah,
roommate being that confidant for her, that person that she can go to with anything, and even with her close friends or this or that, you still saw the divide there. So it was interesting to see how within her own personality and then within the world she's in, she had to navigate something that, you know, isn't easy to navigate in any capacity.
yeah, and like her friends, she has coping strategies that they know and they do with her, but there's still that sort of, they don't really, they're my friends and they help me, but they don't really get it sometimes. And they're trying and,
and just the frustration that she gets sometimes trying to deal with people or not being able to communicate what she's trying to say properly.
yeah.
I really loved it. I thought it made her a really unique perspective, especially in fantasy. Like I've read sci-fi before with autistic main characters or main characters with various neurodivergencies, and it's either been really like sometimes it's been really ham-fisted. Like, did you worry going into it that you would do it a disservice?
Oh yeah, that was a big worry for me. It's like if I'm going
Yeah,
to do this, I have to do it right.
yeah,
And it's I think it helped that I really didn't have to change very much about her to say, okay, this is an autistic character. And the way that I want to write her, the way I want her to interact with the world, this is how she is. And it was a matter of tweaking small things and getting a sensitivity reader to look at it and make sure that I didn't do anything just, weird.
yeah, yeah. Getting like a sensitivity reader is a good idea. Pardon me, a good idea. I'm in my current work in progress, and one's going forward. Pardon me again, sorry. I'm writing a character who's blind, wasn't born blind, but is blinded and can't see anymore. And it struck me when I started writing it that I should probably go and talk to a blind person and find out literally what it's like what's it like when you wake up in the morning, like how's your life changed by it and stuff. But it's an opportunity to learn, which is great, and parts of this book felt like that as well.
Yeah, I definitely had to do a lot of research.
Yeah, it was really.
I was just gonna say, to an extent, as much as it is an opportunity to learn, it's also an opportunity to teach. Like a lot of people might not have ever really had interactions with blind people or neurodivergencies or this or that. So it presents it in a light that's very accessible and less, I don't want to say less intimidating, but to an extent, just at your own pace.
Yeah, and I never wanted to set myself up as a person who's like, this is what autistic people are like because everybody's different and I don't know that. And, I just want to say this is what this character is like. This is how
Yeah.
it is in her.
But I did want to add to that just in terms of when it comes to self-publishing as a whole and everything like that, there's so many different aspects of the stories that like to get the finished product, so many things goes into it when you don't have the publishing house behind you. Like you got to figure out the cover, you have to format, then obviously sensitivity readers, editing, writing the story itself, designing the map. Like all of these things take so much time and effort. And I know you put in the note that the book took you ages to write. It was written over a long period of time. It makes sense why. Like I can imagine going through and working with a sensitivity reader. That's not going to take 3 days. That's going to take a while. And
Yeah.
it'll be a new process and it'll adapt and evolve and change over time. So I think it's really nice that even in the indie space and the self-publishing space, we still have access to those resources and it's still something out there, but it is another thing when you go into the self-publishing route that you have to consider as well.
Yeah. And the big thing is cost. It's like it's going to cost you, these are people that deserve to be paid for what they are doing because they are doing you a very valuable service. But you got to budget it. I feel like.
No, absolutely. Speaking of self-publishing, so you're published with Shadowspark.
Yep.
We've partnered with before. We've spoke to the girls at Shadowspark. They're a great outfit. I really love the stuff that they do. I'm also like like I want to say friends with, but like internet friends with Erica McCorkle, who I know is published through Shadowspark. Do you know Erica? Yeah,
Oh yeah.
Kira
Yeah.
of the Winter. She's great. I only got to read her first Merchants book like last year when I was on holiday, and it blew me away. I absolutely loved it. But I feel like Shadowspark did a great job with things like representation of people that aren't usually represented in these genres and stuff. Like how have you found the process of well, how have you found the process of working with Shadowspark?
They have been so great because they handle all of the stuff that I don't really want to do. Like, they handle the formatting and the getting it on the different platforms and all that stuff. And but I went, I go into publishing like they're never gonna let me do my own covers because that's just not a thing in trad publishing. But
Yeah.
I talked to Jess and like, can I do my own cover? She's like, yes, please do. And I was like, okay, yay. And they contracted the whole series, so it's like I get to publish all the books no matter how well they do, which is something you don't get in trad all the time. And so it's just been a really great partnership.
It very much
That's
puts you, so I was just gonna say, it very much puts you in an opportunity to write the story that you want to write, not necessarily the story that you feel required to. And I think especially once you get into those longer contracts or this or that, obviously not an author myself, but it feels like you can get roped into being pushed in one direction or another. But after having worked with Jess, I know that's very much not the case. And it's very exciting to kind of hear that and that there's still outfits like that around.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's one of the saddest things that I hear is, and I've spoken to loads of authors who went the trad pub route, and then things didn't work out for them. It didn't sell well enough. It wasn't marketed at all, or whatever, or it ended up not being what they thought it was going to be, and they end up in a worse place than when they started. Sometimes not even with the rights to their own work and stuff. And just the horror stories that have came out of it. Like, did you ever try to pursue trad publishing, or did you try and go that route at all?
Yeah, I'm actually still trying with other books that I have, my standalone.
How's that going?
And I queried Hands Like Secrets for a good, almost as long as I had written it. I'm kind of glad that nobody picked it up because, the iteration that became the book now was not the one I was querying. And I think the one I have now is much, much better. And so, but yeah. And, I always knew there was a possibility of, if they pick up book one and it doesn't do well, they might not pick up book two. And then you can't market book two to anybody else because somebody else has book one. So you're kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuck.
I know it's a shame, but it's cool that with self-publishing and stuff, you can put your own work out there and still keep working on other stuff if you want to be traditionally published. In fact, I
Yeah.
know that's a dream that a lot of people have. I certainly had it as well when I was younger. But it's really cool that that just doesn't limit you at all.
Yeah. At this point, I almost only want to be traditionally published just to see what the difference is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking about learning experiences. That would certainly be one. And I think we've worked with a few authors that have done both, and there's obviously pros and cons to each. I hate saying it though. We have 2 minutes and 12 seconds left, so I want to make sure that everything that needs to get said gets said. Especially if people liked Hands Like Secrets. What should they read next? I know we've discussed it, but then
Just like glass.
yes. Where can they get a hold of you? What's the best way to get in contact with you if they had questions about the book or if they want to follow with what you're up to?
Nowadays I'm mostly on Instagram at Never the Rose with underscores underneath. I have a link tree that's there that has all the links to my other stuff. But yeah, if you go to my website, mariahnorris.com, it has all of my stuff on there and it has links to the books and has contact info and all that stuff. So that's probably the best way to find me. Website.
Perfect. And I'll make sure that all that's available in what do you call it? The description, the little caption box below.
Doodly do.
Steve, you got 1 minute if you want to ask your was it deliberate questions.
Oh, okay. I've got a good one. So, was it so? Obviously, the book is somewhat set in a magical school. Did you deliberately try to make it as different from Hogwarts as you could?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was always more of a college, and I saw Hogwarts as more of a high school, so it was already different in my head. But yeah,
I thought
it
I
was
thought it
always
was
different.
way more internally consistent than Hogwarts. I think
Yeah,
Yeah.
this magic makes more sense. You know?
that's honestly music to my ears because I clocked that difference as well. It felt like people were older and a little bit more sure of
Yeah.
themselves and all of that. Because yeah.
Yeah, like there are smaller kids at Aschamon, but Saeli's 19, so she's like, she's in the college part.
I'm so sorry. We have 10 seconds left, but thank you so much, Mariah, for joining us. If you somehow made
Thanks
it
for
this
having
far,
me.
this was Hands Like Secrets. Please check out the sequel and thank you, everybody. It's been a blast.